the vital but delicate task of reviving the Iran deal. Time is running out for the Joe Biden administration, but there is an opportunity for Brussels to take a lead role. Of all the foreign policy challenges facing the Joe Biden administration, none is more critical than salvaging the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action (JCPOA), or the Iran nuclear deal that has been unraveling over the last 3 years when Donald Trump unilaterally discarded it. It also seems the most straightforward because Mr. Biden has consistently advocated a return to the JCPOA provided Iran returns to full compliance. Iran has always reiterated its commitment to the JCPOA, maintaining that the steps it took are reversible as long as the United States lifts the sanctions imposed by the Trump administration since 2018. And yet, it is complicated and time is running out as both Iran and the US struggle to overcome the impasse. US policy reversal. The JCPOA was the result of prolonged negotiations from 2013 and 2015 between Iran and P5+1 China, France, Germany, Russia, the United Kingdom, the United States and the European Union, or the EU. It happened, thanks to the back-channel talks between the US and Iran, quietly brokered by Oman, in an attempt to repair the accumulated mistrust since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Former US President Barack Obama described the JCPOA as his greatest diplomatic success. Iran was then estimated to be months away from accumulating enough highly enriched uranium to produce one nuclear device. The JCPOA obliged Iran to accept constraints on its enrichment program verified by an intrusive inspection regime in return for a partial lifting of economic sanctions. Faced with a hostile Republican Senate, Mr. Obama was unable to get the nuclear deal ratified but implemented it on the basis of periodic executive orders to keep sanction waivers going. Mr. Trump had never hidden his dislike for the JCPOA, calling it a horrible, one-sided deal that should have never, ever been made. After ranting about it for a year, he finally pulled the plug on it in May 2018 and embarked on a policy of maximum pressure to coerce Iran back to the negotiating table. The US decision was criticized by all other parties to the JCPOA, including the European allies, because Iran was in compliance with its obligations, as certified by the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA. For the first year after the US withdrawal, Iran's response was muted as the E3, France, Germany, the UK, and the EU promised to find ways to mitigate the US decision. But by May 2019, Tehran's strategic patience was wearing out as the anticipated economic relief from the E3 EU failed to materialize. As the sanctions began to hurt, Tehran shifted to a strategy of maximum resistance. The unraveling of the JCPOA. On the nuclear front, beginning in May 2019, Iran began to move away from JCPOA's constraints incrementally, exceeding the ceilings of 300 kilograms on low-enriched uranium and 130 mt on heavy water, raising enrichment levels from 3.67% to 4.5%, stepping up research and development on advanced centrifuges, resuming enrichment at Fordo, and violating limits on the number of centrifuges in use. Finally, in January 2020, following the drone strike on Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Commander Gen. Qasem Soleiman, Tehran announced that it would no longer observe the JCPOA's restraints, though its cooperation with the IAEA would continue. Tensions rose as the US pushed ahead with its unilateral sanctions, widening their scope to cover nearly all Iranian banks connected to the global financial system, industries related to metallurgy, energy and shipping, individuals related to the defense, intelligence and nuclear establishments, and even senior political leaders including the Supreme Leader and Foreign Minister Javad Zarif. By N2020, the US had imposed nearly 80 rounds of sanctions targeting close to 1,500 individuals and entities. Events in Iran. This came on top of COVID-19 that affected Iran badly, which had over 1.6 million infections and more than 60,000 deaths. The Iranian economy contracted by 7% in 2019 and another 6% in 2020. In mid-2020, Iran was shaken by a series of unexplained fires and blasts at a number of sensitive sites, including one at the Natanz nuclear facility and another at Kojir, a missile fuel fabrication unit. The damage at Natanz, described as sabotage, was significant, leading Tehran to announce that it would be replaced by a new underground facility. Last November, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, a senior nuclear scientist and head of the Research and Innovation Organization in the Iranian Defense Ministry, was killed outside Tehran in a terrorist attack amid rumors of external intelligence agencies' involvement. Days later, Iranian parliament, dominated by the conservatives, passed a bill seeking enrichment to be raised to 20%, acceleration of deploying new cascades, and suspending implementation of some of the special inspection provisions with the IAEA within 2 months if sanctions relief was not forthcoming. No appetite for talks. Clearly, Mr. Trump's policy may have provided comfort to Israel's leader Benjamin Netanyahu and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, but it failed to bring Iran back to the negotiating table and only strengthened the hardliners. Iran has suffered and there is no appetite for more negotiations. The E3's promised relief instrument in support of trade exchanges INSTEX, created in 2019 to facilitate limited trade with Iran, has been a disappointment. Its first transaction only took place in March 2020. EU-Iran trade fell from €18 billion in 2018 to less than a third in 2019 and dropped further last year. A recent IAEA report has confirmed that 20% enrichment had begun as had production of uranium metal at Isfahan. However, a recent visit by IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi to Tehran enabled a technical understanding to postpone Iran's withdrawal from the additional protocol that it had voluntarily accepted in 2015 by 3 months. Moreover, Iranian elections are due in June and it is likely that President Hassan Rouhani's successor may not be from the moderate camp. Though the nuclear dossier is controlled by the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, he too had to wait for the moderate Rouhani, Zarif combined to be elected in 2013 for the JCPOA negotiations to commence. If the US waits for Iran to return to full compliance before lifting sanctions, or Iran waits for the US to restore sanctions relief before returning to full compliance, it can only lead to one outcome: the collapse of the JCPOA, with Iran going nuclear like North Korea, an outcome that would create major reverberations in the region and beyond. Only good intentions will not be enough to overcome this impasse. Overcoming the impasse. The Biden administration has made a good start by appointing Robert Malley as the U.S. Special Envoy for Iran, but he will need help. Positive steps along multiple tracks are necessary for creating a conducive atmosphere. Release of European and American nationals currently in custody in Iran would help. Clearing Iran's applications to the International Monetary Fund for COVID-19 relief and for supply of vaccines under the International COVAX facility can be done relatively easily. Oman's quiet facilitation helped create a positive environment for the JCPOA. After the Al-Ula summit, Qatar and Kuwait too are well placed to play a diplomatic role, and together, they can urgently explore the possibilities for forward movement in Yemen, with help from the EU and the UN Secretary-General's Special Envoy, Martin Griffiths. The E3 EU need to fast-track deals worth several £100 million stuck in the INS. The Rakesh